Hi, I'm Dr. Victoria M.A. I'm a board certified plastic surgeon in Scottsdale, Arizona. Recently, I received a question regarding how exercise decreases the longevity or the duration of your Botox treatment. Before we get into that, let's just give you a little bit of insight about how Botox actually works. So, as mentioned previously in prior videos, Botox is made by a bacterium called Clostridium, and it's the same thing that gives you botulism, basically. The way that this actually works is that it prevents communication between the nerve cell and the muscle cell. And we can see this kind of up here. So, this is a normal interaction between a nerve cell at the top and a muscle cell at the bottom. There's a little gap in between that's called a neuromuscular junction. And so basically what happens is that the nerve cell tells the muscle cell to contract by sending something across it called acetylcholine. So that's acetylcholine, those little green dots in these little vesicles or bubbles. And it is taken and delivered to the end of this nerve cell and then released into the gap and tells the muscle to contract. That's exactly how it works in normal, everyday muscle and nerve interactions. Now, when we have a Botox molecule or one of the other neurotoxins, what happens is that it breaks down and degrades that delivery vehicle that tells those acetylcholine receptors to go down and bind with the end of this nerve cell and release it into the junction. So basically what happens is that these are just floating around and no one is there to deliver them to the end. The message is never received by the muscle cell, which we can see kind of down here. So see how they're just basically bouncing around like ping pong balls. There's nowhere for that acetylcholine to go. And so the muscle cell is like, what's going on? And doesn't know to contract. And so it's basically paralyzed because it has no direction or instructions. And so that is exactly how Botox and all the other neuromodulators work. Now, we know that over time, we get this function back, and people tell me that it just wears off. But how does it actually happen? So the way that the body makes this wear off is actually by sprouting new little nerve sprouts that are not affected by Botox so that they can deliver these little packages of acetylcholine down to the muscle cell. So this binding of the Botox down here that we can see to that delivery vehicle, which is basically like a mailman. So it's taking away that mailman to deliver those packages and those signals over to the muscle cell. It is irreversible. So that interaction is permanent. But the body obviously does something to give us function back because we can all frown and raise our brows and things like that after a few months. So what happens is the body regenerates these nerve sprouts and creates new ones that are not affected by Botox. And so they can start to tell that muscle cell to start contracting again. And that's why we start to see it wear off in terms of the effect. Now, how does this have anything to do with exercise? So we don't know exactly the answer, but this was studied in a group of patients. They were actually separated into 3 groups. So there was a low exercise group, which is basically just like everyday activities, mostly sedentary, but just everyday activities. And then a moderate and a vigorous group. Now, basically, these are patients that do more vigorous exercise at least 3 to 5 days per week. And this was basically like CrossFit and really high intensity working out. Those patients at the higher end of that spectrum did show that they had return of wrinkles faster at different time points. So even at examining at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, they still had a return of their wrinkles faster than everybody in the low intensity or just sedentary lifestyle group. The reason that we think that happens is that we know that when we exercise, that does deliver more blood flow to the muscle cells, for one thing. The other thing it does is it causes your genes to increase expression in a way that tells the nerve cell to sprout and repair itself. So basically, genes turn on the more we exercise. It tells our nerve cells to start making these new nerve sprouts. So we think what happens is that the nerve sprouts that were eventually going to be made anyways are just made faster. And so you just reach that time point sooner. Of course, this is not a reason to not exercise. However, it is something to consider if you are someone who does a very vigorous exercise many days a week, like most days a week. It's something to know that you may notice a modest decrease in the duration of your Botox. It's just something to keep in mind because you may need to tweak how often you get your treatments or how much in terms of dosage that you get. Hopefully that sheds some light on it, and hopefully we come out with some studies that better tell us why this actually happens so we can maybe develop a longer lasting Botox. But stay tuned. If you have any questions or comments, drop them below.